Okay, I'm recording now. So I'm Emily Diodati, and I work with Student Union and Activities. So I plan all the events at the whole music club in the union. And yeah, I got the pleasure of planning these wonderful music industry job series events. We had one in September with a middle agent. And our next couple are not announced yet, but they're going to be very exciting. So definitely keep your eye out for those. We'll be emailing them out as they come up. So yeah, I'll turn it over to James.
Hey, I'm James Taylor. So currently I work at First Avenue as a talent buyer booker. Um, Obviously that workload's a little bit less right now as things have slowed down, but I'm looking forward to that changing. And a little bit about my history. I guess I'll do like some recent history and then kind of like go back to like college and sort of fast forward through. But so I started working at First Avenue in 2017. I moved to Minneapolis in 2015. And recently prior to moving, I owned and operated a music venue in Austin, Texas called Holy Mountain. We were open for like about 3 years. And at the tail end there of 2015, we were renegotiating our lease, and that wasn't going super well. And in the meantime, my now wife had accepted a job at First Avenue as our marketing director. She's originally from Minneapolis, so we decided to close down the bar and move up here. And then, yeah, I spent a year like touring and was playing in a band, kind of managing a different band that was doing pretty well and trying to figure out what I would do next. And then I knew the First Avenue folks, not just because my wife worked there, but because they used to do their South by Southwest party, which is a music industry conference in Austin. They would do their South by party at my bar. So we had a relationship that went back several years to probably 2011. So I knew them, and it sort of just made sense to start there. Yeah, like taking the history like way back to college and fast forward up to there. So I went to the University of Texas in Austin, and I got a double major in government and sociology. So that was really my passion, and still is outside of music. And I was working at the college newspaper my last couple years of college, and was the editor of the entertainment section and like writing a lot about music. And I'd also started playing in a band at that time, and was like working the door at one of the clubs that like my band used to play at a bunch. And sort of like how I got into like booking, or like sort of started this path, was like I was playing in this band, and sort of the guy who booked like kind of the cool shows in town that I wanted to book my band, like would never book my band, like would never reply to my emails. And I was just young and just like, well, screw this. I can do this. Like, I'll just book shows. So I went to like a different club in town, this venue called Flamingo Cantina, that was doing like, it was kind of like a reggae club. They did like Latin music shows and like world music, and they did the occasional indie rock show, and just sort of said like, hey, I've got a band. I know a bunch of bands. Let me book a show or two. And if it works out, we'll just like keep doing it. And then it kind of just like spiraled from there. And all of a sudden I was like booking, one night a week, and then that would turn, or one night a month. And then that would turn into one night a week, and booking at different venues. And then so like we're talking 2004, 2005. So most tours and stuff at that time were booked on MySpace. So I don't know if I'm sure you guys are familiar with MySpace, at least as a cultural reference point, but so like what would happen is bands would email my band and want to play a show in Austin, but we couldn't play all those shows just because we just couldn't play every show that, bands coming through town were asking to play. But I knew the venue bookers at Austin. I had a great scene with like lots of different music venues. So I knew the people who were booking those shows. And I also knew like the other bands that should be playing those shows, or like bands like, oh, this band, like these three bands would make really good sense with them, and I can like build a show around them. And so it was like, well, I can just like book a show. My band doesn't have to play it for me to book it. And so I just started booking shows from there. In 2009, I went on a pretty decent sized tour with the band I was in at the time. And when that kind of wrapped up, that band sort of like came to an end. Had a band member who passed away, and like I had broken my arm, so I couldn't play drums, and like all these things sort of like made sense. And I sort of realized, I sort of dedicated myself full time to like, okay, I'm going to try to like figure this out, like booking shows, managing bands, and just try to make it work. And I did that for a while, worked with different bands. And then this band that I was managing, Eagle Claw, they were going out on tour. And the main dude in that band was also like general managing this bar that I used to book a lot of shows at. And I remember he texted me and he was like, hey, do you have any interest in managing Beauty Bar? And I was like, oh, you mean like when you're gone on tour? Like, yeah, I could help out with that. And he was like, no, I mean, like, I don't want to do this job anymore. Or do you want to do this? And I knew I was working at bars, like bartending, but I didn't really know. And I was like booking shows, but I mean, we're talking like, you know, barely making rent, right? Like just getting by. And so nothing like not running a bar. And yeah, he gave me that opportunity. And then shortly after, that bar was basically open for another year, and then it closed, not because of anything I did, just because the bar was on its way out, and that's just the natural evolution of things. And the folks who had the lease on that place, they basically were like, we're going to put some partners together and we're going to open a new bar. We don't really know what we want to do. Do you have any ideas? And I kind of had this like aesthetic idea I had for like running like what the venue would look like, and we sort of do all sorts of types of shows and sort of genre-less booking. And yeah, I had the opportunity to do that. And so I did that for 3 years. And then, like I mentioned earlier, our landlord wanted to hike up our rent a lot, which is, again, sort of just the natural ebb and flow of these things. And then it made sense at that point to move to Minneapolis. And then I ended up at First Avenue. So yeah, it was sort of a lot of dumb luck happened in there, but also just like, you know, I graduated from college, and again, I had started playing in bands and started booking shows and booking bands. And it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep doing this until I can't anymore. And that hasn't happened yet. So I just keep doing it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's sort of like the bio and stuff. I don't know if there's any questions now, or Emily, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I guess like along with that, like, do you think that any of those like non-music related things that you got involved with down that timeline, do you think those like were any of those experiences like really helpful, do you think, in your role now?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so like working at bars, like obviously helped, you know, bartending, and I worked at coffee shops, but I would also like book the music, and I had 2 coffee shops that I was like booking the music and the art at, but then also like making coffee. Certainly, you know, didn't necessarily think after graduating college that's what I would be doing, you know, slanging drinks. But it was a means to an end to like, one, like physically put me in the place where I wanted to be booking the shows. And 2, it was always just like a fallback, right? Like like just a funny anecdote, I guess. Like I did an event a few years ago. Oh, it must have been a while ago. Anthony Bourdain. It was an event with Anthony Bourdain, and he just had a new cookbook come out, or a book that his publishing company had put out. And he was chatting with the interviewer, and the interviewer asked like one of these general questions of like, what like keeps you going? And he goes, brunch. And the interviewer's like, what do you mean? And he's like, because I know if this doesn't work out, I can go back to scrambling eggs every Sunday for brunch, and I don't mind doing that. Like, I actually enjoy that. And he's like, so every chance I take, I'm more open to taking those chances because I know if none of it works out, I'll go back to making brunch, and that's fine. And so, for me, that's sort of like was always my approach as well, right? Like, um, I'll take these chances because at the end of the day, I can go make a drink or make a coffee, or I have a college degree that I could, pivot into something completely different. The last couple of years I was in Austin, I got super involved in a couple of nonprofits that were involved in the music industry there. One of them it was called Austin Music Foundation. It was more of like an advisory, some of these type of things. We would do meetings with musicians. How do I get a record deal? Like sort of how do I get a show book? Those sort of things. And then this advocacy group called Austin Music People that was more of, it was an advocacy group for musicians and bands and fans. And so like that, my experience getting my degree in government sociology, like definitely fueled that. And in the last few years, or in the last few months, I started working with Twin Cities Catalyst, which is the group that runs the Garage and the Treasury. So I'm on the board of directors for that organization. So I think, yeah, the experience of like what I majored in has allowed me to have like this advocacy, like almost activism side to like not just booking shows and partying, but like actually like do something to help foster the next generation of people who are going to eventually take my job, so I don't have to do it forever.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of pivoting now to coronavirus, which I'm sure we're all really sick of talking about, but it is still a thing. How has your like day-to-day job changed, like since pre-COVID? Like, were you in an office? Were you like, what did that look like for you? And then how did that transition like with COVID?
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, working at First Avenue, I mean, it was an office job. And, it's interesting. You and I were chatting about this a bit before we jumped on, Emily, but like, prior to that, I was running my own club and like sort of making my own hours. And even when I was doing booking and management, I've always been good at like, okay, I got a job to do and the job's going to get done. Like I've always been a good like self-motivator, I guess. So it's interesting even going to work at First Avenue, which is like an office with a boss and like a desk. And like that was even like an adjustment. And then now to pivot to this like work at home situation, like in many ways, I felt like I was more adapted to it because I'd done that before. And then also, just as this sort of like drags on with COVID and I see, peers and close friends who are maybe thinking about pivoting away from the music industry or trying different things. I think because I had the experience of my bar, Holy Mountain, closing and sort of like, this is everything I'd worked for. Like, what do I do now? My bar is closed. And having that experience of like losing that sort of keeps me motivated. So like, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't know how long it's going to take and when life will be back to normal, but like, I'm not going to give up now. So yeah, the day-to-day is obviously like changed, right? It's less work. There's just less to be done right now. But it's still checking emails and like maintaining relationships with people, which is obviously there's like I think a big part of this industry. I mean, really any industry, I guess, but like, sort of who and how you maintain those relationships. So there's a lot of that. And then just like still a lot of like checking out music and listening to music and playing records and watching concerts on YouTube and like just all of the stuff that is also part of my job, and like reading album reviews on Pitchfork and checking out all the like the hot playlists on Spotify, like just knowing what the trends are, so that when we do start doing shows again, I can be like, oh yeah, that guy who's now finally touring, he or she or they put out, all of these live streams, or like they were doing all this stuff in the downtime or whatever. So I think, yeah, the day-to-day has changed in that the workload is less. I don't know, I keep doing this, I should stop doing that. It's very, the workload is less, but it's still just about like discovering music every day, right? I mean, it's what I do, right? So
Yeah. What do you think, like, and this can be pre-COVID, COVID, whatever, all of it, but what is like really, like, is there any like challenges to your specific role?
oh yeah, like pre-COVID, it's interesting. So like a part of my job is also the running of shows and settling shows. And so that means like meeting the band when they arrive at the venue, like if they're a big enough band, they have a tour manager, talking to the tour manager, and then relaying that information to our operations team at the venue. And so you have these different groups. You have the band, you have their team, which includes their agent who's not at the show, but like maybe is emailing you and say like, hey, how are we looking on pre-sales and stuff? You've got the operations team who like very much wants, like, this is how we do a show, and every show goes like this. And you've got like this, our staff, the sound guys. And so there's a lot of like managing what every person is going to get out of the night, and you know who wants to be the alpha that night, who's going to be the most important person in the room. And so it's a lot of managing those expectations. And at First Avenue, we obviously like very much pride ourselves on how we treat the band. I mean, every band that, and it's easy in some respects, because the bands that enter that room, or the artists that enter that room, there is some renown that goes into it. I mean, they know they're entering, hallowed grounds or whatever. Like it's an important place to like bands look forward to. So that makes it certainly easier, but we do try to go above and beyond in making sure that like bands are really comfortable there. And, for me, I've been there, I've been on the road, like I've been a long way from home. And, when a sound guy is a jerk for no reason, like it sucks. You're like, I miss my bed, I miss my cat, and I don't need you to be a butthead because you don't like where I'm putting my drum set right now. Like, it's just stupid. So we try to pride ourselves on like going above and beyond in that way. But that is a challenge. And then, so that's on like the show running side of it. In terms of like booking shows, it's risk management, right? It's sort of like knowing, I never know how a show, every show I book, I have what I think it's going to do, what I hope it does, and what I certainly hope it doesn't do. And when I make my offers and I, guarantee an artist money, like I certainly hope that the show does like right around what that break even number is. And if it doesn't, like, I know when I go into the office the next day, like I'm probably gonna get asked about it, right? Like, what happened there? Which isn't, I mean, obviously I work in a very supportive place, and it's never like, what did you do? It's just like, hey, we lost some money last night. What happened with that? It's like, well, it was bad weather, or I certainly thought the show would do better, or like, that band's record came out and then it got a 6.5 on Pitchfork, and so like no one cares. Or you pay a band like next to nothing because you're like, well, this is like a new up and coming band, and like $200 is reasonable, and then they get a 8.5 on Pitchfork, and the show sells out in advance, and you make a bunch of money, and you're like, well, then the same question gets asked, like, what happened there? Like, I don't know, just got lucky tonight, I guess. But yeah, so it's like the managing risks, managing expectations, like that's I think the hardest part, right? And I don't think that gets easier. Like I certainly am better at making more informed decisions. I mean, when I was running my club, it was very much like if a band wanted $1,000, it was like, sure, here's $1,000. Great. We want to book the show. And I wasn't maybe looking at the bottom line as much as I should have been, but you're having fun, whatever.
Live and learn.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say is like the most enjoyable aspect of your job, either on like the booking side or the like day of show running side?
Yeah, I mean, so like the cliche answer, but it's obviously true, is like when you put on a good show and the room is full and the joy when people are singing along to every word, like that's fun because you know that you are a small part of making that happen. You know, I think when I book a band that's relatively new and people come, or a lot of people haven't heard them, and people come up to me after the show, they're like, dang, that band was really good. Or when I have the opportunity to maybe champion a local band that I like really believe in, like that's gratifying. Like when I can book a local artist's like album release show and it does really well and they say thank you, like that means a lot. Like that thank you is why I'm doing this, you know, that, and I want to see your band play. So like that's really fulfilling. And then, you know, I'm always real hesitant to like glamorize the rock and roll partying, drinking aspect of things, but that's part of it, the lifestyle, right? And like I really enjoy when successful musicians are my friends. Like I enjoy being able to and make new friends, being able to like work a show in the main room and the show gets done and the artist says, hey, do you want to go to Depot and have a drink? Do you want to come on the bus or hang out in the garage and have a drink? Like I'm lucky that I have a lot of friends who I met when they weren't successful, but who've now become successful musicians, and we've been able to like maintain those relationships. And there's a joy in like seeing them do well, and a joy when they come to town and I get to, especially now when it's with First Ave, I get to be like, welcome to First Ave. Let me show you around. Like that's super gratifying, right? I mean, it's nice to have friends who work in the industry, and when you get to spend like a night doing what you both love, then that's like super gratifying.
Mm-hmm. What's been your favorite First Ave show since you joined the booking team there that you either got to be a part of or not?
Man, that is like,
it's okay. You don't have to answer. I understand. There's a lot of good stuff happening, but
no, totally. I'm trying to think of some ones that were really cool. Like, so there's like a couple of different examples of like types of shows, right? So like when Hamilton, this is like maybe a silly example, but like when Hamilton was in town, right? So like one of the things that a Broadway tour will do when they're in different cities, they'll do fundraiser events for Broadway across America, like at a different venue, and they're usually at cabaret style, like variety shows. Well, when Hamilton was in Minneapolis for their like 2 or 3 weeks showing or whatever it was, I worked with them to produce an event at First Avenue that was like a fundraiser event for Broadway across America. Like that was really cool to be able to do something that was like not necessarily what we always do at First Avenue, and work with like a really experienced team on like a different level of stuff that like I don't really have like a theater background booking or producing those sort of events. So like that was really cool. And so when we have the opportunity to use the space to do something sort of different or outside of the norm, like I think that's really, really fun stuff. And I enjoy those shows a lot. You know, when a local band starts from the entry and I'm able to see them move up, like that's really special. So like Yam House is a local band. Like we booked them in the entry opening for someone, and then they headlined the entry, and then they headlined the main room and sold it out. Like that's really special too. Like those shows stick out. Or like when a Dwino Roland is able to sell out the entry on his album release show, like that's really that's really cool. Those shows always seem to stick out the most. God, other shows like Liam Gallagher from Oasis played in the main room, and that was sold out. And like he came out, and you know the opening chords of Rock and Roll Star. It's like and like that. I was just like, oh my gosh, like I'm probably never gonna see Oasis, so this is like as close as it gets.
That was a great show. I was there too.
Oh yeah, what a good show. It was so much fun. Yeah, shows like that. Like Tame Impala at Surly was really great last summer. Like I love, it's funny, like when I was growing up and like too cool for school and punk rock, like high-end production arena shows, like that stuff like never interested me at all. Like no thank you. But now that I like work on that side of things and I like understand what goes into that, I certainly am more appreciative of that. So like a good like a real spectacle show, like I think that Tame Impala show was, like those shows stand out to me a little bit more now.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, there's got to be so many more.
Yeah, well, if you think of them throughout the rest of this, feel free.
Yeah.
Before I jump into like more of, I have some like questions that like either students asked or like advice related questions. Does anyone that's on the call have questions as we're going? Yeah, feel free to just unmute yourself. It's all good.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so just kind of a general question. So as a like a booker, talent buyer, what do you want to see in like a booking email from a band that's looking to like book at one of your venues or something?
Right. You know, for me, like as straight to the point as possible. You know, the number of times I get, like I understand when I get a long wordy email that's maybe got like a bio in there, like I understand the desire to send that. But like I just need a link to your music and you're like your social media page, like that's it. And from there, you know, I'll decide one whether I like your music or not. But that's honestly not even a barrier. Like there's plenty of music that I necessarily like don't like, but I'm more than happy to book it because either I understand it or like I understand that there's an audience for it or stuff. And then links to social media just to like see that you're active. Like if you send me a link to your Twitter or your Facebook and the last post was like 6 months ago and you've played 3 shows in between now and then, like then you're not holding up one end of your part of this arrangement. You know, and honestly beyond that, like for me personally, it's meeting people, like you know, and I think maybe that comes from like having my own club that I was like there all the time, and that I was doing all the booking. You know, if you come to a show in the Entry or a show at the Turf Club and you say like, hey, I emailed you, you know, a month or so ago, like chances are I got back to you because we reply to every email. But, you know, if you're like, hey, have you had a chance to listen? Or like, you know, we've got this show coming up, or you just say, hey, how's your night going? Like, when we don't talk business, you're far more likely to get a show out of me at that point. Like it's, you know, like I mentioned earlier, one, it's just I'm not booking everything I like. So it's not just a matter of like, do you have this amazing quality demo that like sounds great? Like, I don't care if it's not, if you just set up a phone in your practice room. Like if I get the gist of it, it's fine. And even if you don't have a very good recording, but you're playing shows and I can look at the other bands that you're playing shows with, and maybe I know those bands. Like if I haven't heard your band, but you're playing with like Vile and Gully Boys, well, then I probably can assume what you sound like, and I'm more than happy to book you a show if you're playing a show with them, right? So yeah. And then the second thing is like just get to like, let's just hang out. Like it doesn't have to be work all the time, right? And I realize that's not for everyone. Like you're not gonna go out every night of the week or anything, but like for me, that's how I got ahead in the business, is, you know, going to shows every night of the week, seeing other bands. Like, you know, when I was much younger and sort of, I had this band right out of college. It was like doing okay. It was sort of the band that got a lot of the balls rolling in terms of like booking and stuff. I remember we'd gotten passed up for a show, like supporting a touring band that we were huge fans of, and this other local band who we were friends with, they got the show, and I was complaining to a mutual friend, like, Marcia, I don't get it. Like, why do we get passed over for this show? Why do we keep getting passed over for these shows? And she said, because no one knows who you are. You're just an email address. You're just some kid at a computer who's emailing constantly. Like, go to the shows, go meet Graham, who's the person who wasn't booking my band, who led me to start book. Like, go meet him. Like, go say hello. You'll probably get a show booked when he knows who you are. And for me, that was just like a huge life lesson of like, okay, like this is, if I'm going to do this, I have to go to shows. I have to support other bands because one, it's the right thing to do. They're my friends, but also I want to play shows together. I want to be able to book shows and know, you know, who those other cool bands are. And then like turning around and being the first one to send an email in the morning. So there's plenty of people like me who got to start around the same time as me, who, you know, went out every night and just burned out, right, and faded away. But I remember once, I think it was when I was running my bar, I'd had, you know, you've got like liquor reps who go around to the bars and they try to get you to pick up some new vodka or some new beer or something. And I was hanging out with one of those guys at a show at my venue, and we must have talked about something financial. He was going to do something. We were going to do a deal together. And I shot him an email like 9 a.m. the next morning, like, hey, just following up on the stuff we talked about. You know, I just want to make sure this, and this was still in play. He emailed me back. He's like, I don't remember that conversation at all, but I'm going to trust that it happened. I was like, oh yeah, it happened. All those things where he's like, also, why were you up at 8 a.m.? Like, because you got to get up and work, dude. Like, what? Just because I was drinking with you till 2 a.m. doesn't mean like I got to keep working. And so like that sort of approach has sort of always, you know, I just try to keep that attitude, right? Of like, I'm going to be the first one to send the email in the morning. So it's the first thing you send when you sit down here, when you finally start working. Yeah. I think that answered your question.
No, that was good.
Yeah.
Cool.
And answered it, and then some other questions that I had too.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, going off of that, like, you know, making those in-person introductions. I think that's kind of been my biggest barrier to entry, you know, just being an email address. Otherwise, how did you like know who to talk to or where to go once you were at the show? Or how did you make those conversations and those connections?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, I think Austin probably in some ways like Minneapolis, like is at its core a pretty small town, like with, at least within the industry, like sort of, the joke in Austin was always everyone knows everyone. So,
okay.
You know, I just sort of like, I think you know, your social media, like you just, oh yeah, that's what that person looked like. I know who that person is. And so then I would just go up and talk to them. Yeah, I think that answers your question. I mean,
yeah, no,
I understand. So. Like if there's a venue that you're trying to get booked at and the person doing the booking is like that hard to track down that you don't know who they are, then like they're probably not very good at their job, honestly. But also it's funny that you just made me think about this. So like when I was booking, so I mentioned earlier I was booking 2 coffee shops. So it was this coffee shop I had worked at, and I I think I had like missed a few shifts in a row, and the owner, who was like a friend of mine, was like late for shifts or something. The owner, he was like, hey man, like you can't work, I gotta fire you. You can't work in a coffee shop anymore, but you could take over doing our music and art booking. The person who was doing it doesn't want to do this. And this is clearly like more of what you want to do, instead of like serving drinks at 7 a.m., serving coffee at 7 a.m. So like maybe you start doing that. So I took over the booking of this coffee shop, and as you can imagine, like a lot of the performers there, it's singer-songwriters, and a lot of them come out of sort of like the faith and worship music community. There's just a lot of that. And I remember once I would like never go to the shows at the coffee shop just because it was just, I would go every once in a while, but I wouldn't go to like every show. And definitely not like the worship singer-songwriters, not that there's like anything wrong with that, of course, but like just that's not my jam. So I wouldn't go to those shows. And I remember once I was there and I struck up a conversation with one of the performers, and he's like, it's funny, there's all these like, there's this whole community of singer-songwriters, and they all know who you are because you're like very nice and you book all their show, you book us like regularly at these coffee shops, but like no one's ever met you. And I was like, sorry, like I should come to more shows. Meanwhile, while I'm telling you that, like, you gotta get out there, but yeah, I always remember feeling like I should go to more of these shows, but yeah, I mean, I would hope that if a booker or someone is good at their job, you could be able to find them,
Okay.
They should want to be found.
So I guess the people that filled out the RSVP form, I don't know where all of them are, but they did ask some questions.
Yeah.
So one of them asked, I'm very interested, and if this is any, like either of your questions, you can claim it. I don't have the name attached to these, but if you're like, oh, that was me, that's cool. Someone asked, how do I get my foot in the music industry from Minnesota, even though I'm not from the city or state where the music industry is typically popular? So like Nashville, New York, LA. Like, how do you start like breaking into like Minneapolis, because it is like a smaller, like it's not like a music, like it is, right. Music is a very central part of it, but it's like, it's not the Nashville,
Yeah, and I would say too, like some of those cities have different aspects to it. So like most of the booking agents, right, live in LA, and like a lot of the label people, especially if you're country or Americana, like they all have offices, but also like the PROs, the like ASCAP, CSAC, BMI, they're all based in Nashville. So, I mean, I think one answer to that question is like, what is it you're trying to do in the industry? If it's playing music and being a musician, I can't think of a better place to be, right? Like there's a really good infrastructure of smaller music venues where you can cut your teeth and like really figure it out, and then mid-sized rooms, and certainly that's what I love about First Avenue, is that we have different sized rooms, so I can work with a band that starts at our small room, like a nerdy who sells out the entry, and then we can do a show at the 650 cap room and like keep building together. So I would say that for Minneapolis, if you're a musician, I think that it's there. And I think there's a lot of like industry people in and what I mean by that is like more of like the production side of things. Like there's a lot of tour managers and like sound engineers who are touring, working, like this is their full-time support a family gig, right? And you can have those jobs living here. For some people, it may require moving to it. I mean, I was lucky to get my start in Austin, which was, obviously a huge music community, had a lot of different venues, also had the bonus of having South by Southwest there. So like once a year, everybody was coming to Austin. So it was a great place to get a leg up. And there's a lot of similarities to Minneapolis and Austin. And I'm glad that I got out of Austin and could experience the industry and from a different perspective in terms of like how things are done, and work for a company like First Avenue that has such a history and a way of doing things. But yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, it depends what you want to do, right? One sort of like example I always give is that, because I book so many bands and talk to so many artists, they all want to be successful. I mean, who doesn't, right? But the likelihood of that is like pretty small. So like I'm a huge basketball fan. So to me, it's like, you think of like the best basketball player on your high school team. Well, the college team is all the best basketball players from their high school. And then the NBA is like maybe the best basketball player from like a couple of colleges, plus then the rest of the world. But if you love basketball, you could work in basketball. There's many things you could do in the music and still have like an amazing life. And the music industry to me is the same way. Like I play drums, and because I play drums, I was able to do a lot of great things. Toured like 35 states, 5 countries, like done some really amazing experiences, but that has a shelf life, and none of those bands were like really successful. You haven't heard of any of them. And I, you know, I didn't have a ton of success based on my ability to play music, but because I was able to find a job and do what I love and still work in the music industry, I'm still able to have like this really amazing career. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing I always try to talk to young people, especially young people who are musicians, like this is super great. And like, you should pursue your music as much as possible, but the likelihood of you being Lizzo is like pretty slim, right? So, but you could be any number of people who work on Lizzo's team who have really successful careers and really cool lives because they have a skill, either they're super organized or, for me, like the two biggest things that I think have led to like maybe my success, whatever that may be, is like being organized, like being really comfortable with like making spreadsheets and knowing how to keeping track of like every detail of every show, and then and just staying like super organized. And if you have those skills, I think you can have a career and a passion for music. You can have a career in the industry, right? You don't have to be a musician.
Yeah. I guess building off of that, because like I know for me, the whole reason I started planning these events is I have literally zero musical skill, like bare minimum. I was in choir, but that was like never had a solo, super background. But I've always known that like I love music and I want to like continue to work in the music industry after college, specific on like more business related things like artist management, PR, like on those end of things. And a lot of people ask questions about like advice for like college majors or like activities to get involved in that like can help make those experiences more available. And like obviously like internships are a huge thing, and right now they're very few and far between just because of the state of the industry. But like any advice, like internships, academics, stuff along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I mentioned before, I majored in government and sociology, and that was just what I was passionate about. Like I knew I wanted to be involved in music. Even at 18, I just, it was really important to my parents that I went to college, and obviously I'm not an idiot. I knew that was important too. So I did that. And, I was always a good writer and had a passion for writing. So working at the newspaper in college and like writing about music, that was another way to, again, just get to know people. Like I met publicists, like, oh, what does a publicist do? Oh, this is cool. Like I could do this. I could be on the other side of this equation and like doing that. And then when I started like managing bands, which was, small, local to Austin bands, but like I knew what a press release looked like because I'd received a ton of them because I was the person who a band was trying to get to write about their album. So when it came time for me to be the person to send that email saying, hey, write about my album, I knew what that looked like because I'd been on the other side of that equation. And I think, I've said this before, but like at a young age, I think when I knew I wanted to work in the music industry, it was important to me to experience that from all angles. So I've been a musician and been on that side, been on the stage and been on that side of the equation. But I've also been a stage manager and been the person telling a band to get on stage at this time and that your set is done at this time. And I know how much it screws up a night if your set goes over a little bit. I've been a person writing about music, receiving a press release. So when I was a manager, I knew what the press release looked like going out. I've worked at the bar, so I know what it's like to bartend on a busy night. And so when I book a busy show, I check in on my bartenders, like, hey, how are things going? Like, it's always been important to me to understand all the different parts that go into. I've worked the door at play. I mean, that was how I got into working at bars, was like working security at the door, like taking cash. So like, I know how frustrating that can be when some drunk person is like hassling you over the $10 cover or something stupid, or when it's freezing cold and you're sitting at the door like checking IDs and it's miserable because it's 1 a.m. on a Tuesday night and you're like, what am I doing with my life? But I've done all of those things, and so I think that makes me better at my job, or at least I have a better understanding of it. Yeah, I think that answered your question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Sure. Someone asked, the thing is, I wish I could ask follow-up questions to these people's questions, but any general advice for bands that are looking to get more serious about playing shows and touring? And they specified after COVID goes away someday. So.
Yeah, I'm interested. Obviously, I'm as in the blind as anyone else in terms of like what that is going to be like when that finally happens, in terms of even what sort of venues there are out there. It's tough because I booked a lot of bad tours when I was young. But if I hadn't booked those bad tours, like, thankfully I was lucky that I had good friends and good people who were willing to take a chance. And like I mentioned before, if I hadn't booked that band Eagle Claws tour, then that guy who was also the general manager of the bar I ended up working at wouldn't have had the opportunity to offer me the job and stuff like that. Or, so, I think my point there is like, it's tough for me. I want to say just get in the van and do it, but I'm also like 40 now, and that just seems crazy to do that. But I mean, I did that. I got in a van that had no seats and just a bed in the back, at the two captain's chairs, and then a futon mattress, and then our gear, with nothing separating the gear from us if anything bad had happened. And yeah, you get in a van and do it, because that's what I grew up like idolizing. Now, is that the smartest thing to do? I don't know. I talk to, younger bands now. I know the Gully Boys have had a lot of good touring. Like, I mean, obviously DIY touring still exists, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. If you can rent a PA for under $100 and there's a room that'll let you set it up, like, you can have a rock and roll show like that, or a rap show or anything, right? That's always going to be there. And even I would think there's going to be more of that, especially on a smaller level, right? Like, it's going to be harder to find just your 100, 200 cap venues. They're probably going to have an extra revenue stream. So maybe more shows are like playing at Moon Palace and stuff like that, or like I'm trying to think of something similar, or like a Can Wonderland, or like Cadence Records there. Like, that's a great example.
There's a lot of there were a bunch of basement venues around the U of M too. People are just throwing shows in like their basements and garages.
Right. Yeah. Or like, what was the all ages venue that was over off of Nicolette? What was that DIY space called? I don't know. But there I feel like there's going to be more of that, right? Because I do think just a lot of smaller venues are going to, I mean, a lot of them have already closed, right? Yeah, but I think that you just have to do it, right? I mean, there's no like key to doing it, and you'll just get better. right? The more shows you play, the more experience you get. I mean, there's no experience comparable to, pulling up to a venue and like loading in the snow or the 100-degree heat and like not knowing if anyone is ever going to is even going to show up, and maybe no one shows up and you're just playing for the bartender, and that's fun and a memorable crappy story that you get to tell later when the tour is over. Or maybe like 150 people were there and it's like amazing. But I don't think that's not going to change, right? Like I don't think the future of live music is on our computer here, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So as cliche as it is, it's just like, it's do it yourself, or I like to say do it together. It's much better. Like, just getting out there and playing shows.
Okay, well, cool. We have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, stories about their day, anything you want to throw out there, anything is welcome, I guess.
Bjorn and Alex are either of you, are you musicians or like wanting to get in the industry, or what? Bjorn, you go first.
Yeah, so I actually graduated from the U of M like 2 years ago, and this just came up on my Facebook like 5 minutes before this. And I was like, oh, this would be sweet. Because in college I planned a couple shows. I was in a fraternity and we used to do a show called Derby Days.
Right.
So like my freshman year we had Waka Flocka and Chief Keef, and like then I put it on my junior year and we had some local bands. I have some buddies in like General B and the Wiz, if you've ever heard of them.
Oh, I love that. Seth and I love
Seth, Kai, Quincy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something I've always really wanted to get back into, as even just like a hobby or something, because I loved it and I miss it. So yeah, I just kind of just looking to learn more and figure it out.
Awesome. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm a musician in a band. Just interested in learning more about like the music and the booking side of things, because like we've been doing it, I've been figuring it out through trial and error, but like getting perspectives from someone who knows what they're talking about is very, very good.
Yeah, very nice.
For sure. No, I mean, when I was, before I was on the board of that organization, Austin Music Foundation, like I said, they had like lots of panel discussions, and I was going to all of those. And again, also to meet people, to like hang out and like afterwards introduce myself and stuff, but also just to sit in the audience and like, just soak in the information, like I always joke, like your goal should be to find like that thin line between being persistent and being annoying, and just like set up camp there and like just like that. Like one of the first venues I worked at, Red 7, my friend opened it and I would just go there every night of the week. And it was a pretty rough and rowdy like punk rock bar. And I was just there every night, and there'd be security issues, and I would just like find myself helping out. And finally my buddy was like, we should probably start paying you. Like, you want to work here? You want to work security here? And so, or like when I was in high school, like the first job I ever had in high school, I think I like dropped off an application and then was going like every few days, like to see if they were hiring yet. And I remember after I'd worked there a while, the manager was like, we finally hired you because it was the only way to stop you from coming around. Showing up asking if we were hiring yet. So yeah, you don't want to be annoying, right? Like I tell bands all the time too, like you emailing me is like not annoying. Like I actually get paid to reply to your emails. I have health insurance and like a good job doing what I love. And like, this is like, you're not going to annoy me by saying like, hey, will you book my band? Like, I might not be able to, but it's like certainly not annoying. Like that's just not the case, right?
Mm-hmm. So are there any good organizations in Minneapolis, kind of like that board that you served on in Austin, that you would recommend looking into?
Yeah. So I what's the music in Minnesota? Where's that nonprofit called? It's my understanding that I think they do some stuff like I'm talking about. Minnesota
Okay.
Music Coalition. That's
Okay.
what. So I think I'm not super familiar with them, but I think that they did a lot of that. And then I know with Twin Cities Catalyst Music, the group that runs the garage, we're maybe pivoting a bit to doing more of that. I think, considerably younger people than either of y'all, like primarily like high school aged kids and particularly like young kids of color and women and LGBTQ kids, just showing them like, hey, the music industry like is an option for you. Like you can have a career in this industry, and here are what some of these careers look like. Because I think a lot of people just aren't exposed to that. So I know that we're trying to do that with Catalyst, but I think that would probably also be like a younger crowd, younger audience than y'all. But yeah, I mean, anything that you can find that's like an opportunity, or even if it's not Minnesota based, right? Like trying to like find those opportunities to like learn from other people, obviously is huge. I mean, I was lucky that I had some really good mentors, even if some of them were begrudgingly mentors and didn't want to help me out, either because it was competitive. I mean, it is a competitive industry, or for whatever their reason was. I had some really great friends who were able to like, tell me the right and wrong ways to maybe go about getting things done. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, well, it's 8:30. So
Fun.
yeah, went pretty quick, but thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'll be sending out, now that you've like, since I'm assuming both of you had to RSVP to like get into this event, once we announce our next speaker, I'll include you guys on an email and you'll get to see. It's very exciting. I'm very excited about the next one. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for putting it on.
Yeah, and thanks
you for talking with us.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Emily, I'll follow up with you over email afterwards. Yeah, thank you guys for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.